Okay, folks, we'll just make a start. And welcome to the candidates. Welcome. This is Scrimgeour from the Scottish Green Party. We've got Chris Stevens from the Scottish National Party, and we've got Zubir Ahmed from the Scottish Labour Party. For folks that don't know me already, I'm Morgan Mullen. I am the regional organiser of the Copperson's branch. Kathy Miller, the branch secretary, was quite insistent that I chair this meeting, and when she was insistent on me doing that, she had quite a cheeky look on her face. So we'll see what's in store. We'll find out why that was. So welcome to folk that have joined the meeting in person, and the folk that have joined the meeting online. And I'll just set out the format for tonight's hustings in a wee second. There is no fire drill planned, and the fire procedure is to leave just following the fire exit signs from the fire door, which is immediately to the right of the exit of this room, if that comes up. And the congregation point after that is Jollibees, I think, isn't it? Down on the street. The toilets are at the far end of the corridor, and I think we'll leave the door on the latch for folk to get back through. Siobhan, what do you think?
Stairs.
The stairs.
No good for me.
And have we got a person like this?
I've been told in the past that I don't know. Sorry.
Well, maybe
I
it's
can't do all the stairs.
No, well,
I'll cut it then.
well,
What's your effort? You
I
find
can hear that at the bottom.
You get like it, I'm like,
we'll only be addressed that anyway, so just you keep us right on that as the branch health and safety officer for sure anyway, so we'll have an action plan on that soon. So to let folk know, we will be recording this meeting as well. I'm sure the candidates will be used to that. Unfortunately for me, I've not had time for a haircut or a shave. More time to buy a better shirt, but we'll just make do. So I think the last bit of safety and housekeeping before we start is please nobody lean against that wall, because to keep the branch banner hung like that, which looks quite nice, the rest of that wall is unsecured, so if somebody leans on that, they'll fall back. Delboy only falls in horses style, and we don't want the claim on our hands. So I think we're ready to start. So we have a few questions that were submitted in advance that we will put to all of the candidates, and if you could give a brief answer, that would be appreciated, and then we'll open up the discussion to questions from the floor and questions online. For folk online, we'll ask you to raise your hands, and the reason we've got a few questions submitted in advance is just for some of the biggest ticket items in the branch for health workers and for social care workers. I suppose we want to raise those questions in a structured way before we open things up totally. So just to begin with, we are aware of very difficult working context for our members after the COVID pandemic and after 14 years of Tory austerity. And we'll note at this point that despite being invited, the Conservatives haven't provided somebody to come and speak tonight. Surprise, surprise. We're aware of challenges that the health service is facing in Scotland, but also throughout the UK. So we know that some good things have happened in the health service under the SNP. Pay is better than it is for health workers than anywhere else in the UK, but at the same time our members are deeply unhappy in a lot of different ways around short staffing, working conditions, morale, and some of the cuts that we'll get onto in the questions. But we know that in Wales, where there was government, and in Northern Ireland, where there's a different political dispensation, and in England run directly by the Tories, things are not exactly rosy either. So we're hoping tonight that it will be clipped up point scoring, that people will hear specifics about what different parties and candidates want to do in concrete terms to answer these questions. So the first question that was submitted in advance. So this branch, Unison NHS Glasgow Clyde and CPS, is currently campaigning against the cutting of jobs in frontline NHS services in Glasgow City. That's 63 full-time equivalent posts last year, 77 full-time equivalents so far this year, with at least 40 more planned. These cuts span roles in health visiting, administration, mental health support services, sexual abuse counselling, and the planned abolition of the hospital at home service. It's worth noting at this point that the most recent cuts passed without any votes against from Labour, SNP or Scottish Green Party representatives that were there. So with that context, in answer to these cuts, what will you and your party do if elected to save these jobs and protect frontline health services in the city? So, we'll start with Zubir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's lovely to be here, fellow healthcare workers in the west of Scotland. We all know this is happening. We've got recruitment freezes in GG&C, and most West of Scotland health boards are being told to slash spending. We also know as a percentage of overall Scottish budget, the health spending has decreased. It used to be running 7-8% above what England did, and now it's running around 3%. So that's the context in which this is happening. But actually, I think it's more than just about money, because at the same time as these jobs are being cut, we all know that those of us that work in healthcare, the number of temporary workers we're bringing in through agencies, and so we always seem to be doing is not planning for the future and simply just firefighting in the short term. And we talk about privatisation of healthcare and how we're going to, some parties talk about legislating against it, but you can legislate against it all you want, but until you have a long-term plan that retains your experienced staff, it's not going to go anywhere, because all you do in that situation, you end up at crisis point, and then you pick up the phone to an agency or to a private company to come in and do a waiting list or bring in nursing staff. So you really, really, really need to grasp this nettle and understand why, first of all, so many of our staff are leaving. And I think we all know that, those of us that work there, it's not a happy place to work. I'm sure, like me, we used to hop skip into work maybe 10, 15 years ago, not so much now. Maybe a bit of dread, maybe the heart rate goes up a little bit. And we need to get that feeling that the NHS is ours again, that we work best when we work in teams. It's a team sport, isn't it? Healthcare, whether it's social care in the hospital. We don't have that anymore, it's fragmented. So we need a root and branch, I think, look at how we staff hospitals and engage the people that work in them. And that's from management down. We know management, especially in the west of Scotland, is particularly poor. It seems that there was never any new blood. We're always just rotating around the same, let's just say mediocre people. And it's creating a lot of toxicity. So I think that is the way to sort the situation. It meant money, yes, and we are bringing more money into the health service through the taxation of the non-DOMs. Even from Westminster, we think it can have an impact in Scotland. But I think moreover than that, it's actually who controls and runs the health service. And I think it has to be people that understand it, that have worked on the front line, rather than abstract managers. And a lot of them are now abstract managers, I'm afraid. I come across them all the time, and sometimes I hit my head off a brick wall. I'm sure Carolyn will probably feel the same. So I think that's where we're going wrong. And in some ways we're going, in compare England, I think sometimes we can get under this impression that everything is rosier here than England. But we actually have lots to learn from one another. And that learning is not happening either, because it doesn't suit the two governments that are in charge right now to do it.
Thanks, Zubir. So I'll have a supplementary on that if nobody else in the crowd does. But Chris, could you go next, please?
Yes, thank you, Lachlan. And as someone who is a Unison member in the local government side, I fully understand some of that feeling. There was low morale before I was elected, and I think that there's low morale right across public services across the piece. It's not unique to health. Local government, central government, where I'm PCA's parliamentary group chair, I think there's just a real concern across workers who work for public services who feel that they're, we know that morale is low, they don't feel that they're being supported enough. So I fully get that particular issue. I think in relation to your question, Lachlan, I'm very exercised about these job cuts in particular, but also the decision making around it. That there are people who are not elected representatives who are allowed votes on some of these matters. I am very concerned that that's the case, because people should be accountable, because if someone votes for something, then at least you as a member of the public can go to that person and say, well, why did you vote that way? So I do think that there's something to be looked at there. I also think that there's a unique challenge in Glasgow. And I am a real advocate and supporter of looking at Glasgow's unique funding arrangements, because the problem I think we have is that Glasgow is not recognised and should be recognised as having metropolitan status in its local government funding arrangements. Now, why do I think that? Is because there are people who come into this city who use our services, but they don't live in the city boundaries, but they come in, and I think that there has to be some recognition. And I'm pleased the Scottish Government's looking at that, because it does need to look at that. It does need to look at Glasgow's unique position in Scotland, and to make sure that we push for, I think, some sort of special status in our arrangements, and part of that is that if you look at Glasgow, 80% of council taxpayers are band D and below, and I don't think that's sustainable. If you were to look at an English local authority like Liverpool or Manchester, places like East Renfrewshire and places like you would see in Eastern Bartonshire would be part of the Glasgow city boundary. And I think that if we don't get metropolitan status, we're going to have some honest conversations around that. And I do think that's something that I hope will happen. That won't happen in isolation by one political party. I think all the political parties need to have that discussion about where Glasgow's place is. And the reason I'm exercised around some of these job cuts as being a member of Parliament, I know the work that some of these workers do with the asylum seeker community, for example, and that's something I care passionately about, because I want to see asylum seekers welcomed here. They have very unique challenges. Some of them went through torture. They have huge mental health issues because of the experiences they've had in their lives, and so I see it from that perspective. I also see it from the perspective of someone who, and I've shared this with Zubir actually on Friday, I thought I had a season ticket with at the Southern Journal because I had my mother, my niece, my nephew were going in the last year for various health treatments. So I know the pressures, I've seen the pressures under just being a visitor at the hospital. And so I think that we need to continue that approach. But the last thing I would say, Lorcan, which I think is very important, is that the health side of Unison has always had a social partnership relationship with the Scottish Government employer. It's not quite like local government, where sometimes in local government the employers and the trade unions are bashing each other. That social partnership has to continue and has to be seen to continue, and we need to encourage that so that happens and takes place.
Okay. There'll be a couple more things to come back to that, Chris. But Carol?
Thank you. Thanks everybody for these all. So, as Zubir alluded to, I'm also another healthcare worker. And while there may well be structural solutions to the question that you asked, or there may well be personnel solutions, I think the underlying problem is that a balanced budget was sought and that it couldn't otherwise be met, and therefore it needs more money, basically. We need to find a way to invest more money to secure those posts that have been lost, or to prevent further cuts. The Scottish Greens would want to ensure that the progressive taxation system that we've helped introduce in Holyrood is expanded across the UK, and also that we tax the richest 1% of the population, those that have got more than 3.4 million in wealth, in a progressive tax system which will hopefully generate money that permits us to fund and secure our public services. That's a way to help with national health service funding, but of course local councils need funding too, and we absolutely support and agree with the need to entirely abolish the not progressive council tax system and find a new way to fund that, absolutely. So I think we have to be honest and say that it needs more money invested, as well as the other structural personnel issues that have been raised. The money is not able to go far enough to secure and maintain the posts that we've got.
Okay. So, Rose wants to comment in a second, but just a few quick things for clarity for me. So, Zubir, you've talked about additional spending on health by the evidence planned in England, and if there are environment consequentials, would you support this branch in pushing for the consequentials to be used specifically to save these community health jobs in the city?
If I'm honoured enough to be an MP, I think that's something I would support. The question is, even the first question is though, when that money comes into the Scottish equivalent of our treasury, what are the Scottish Government going to do with it? Because they're not obliged to even spend it on health, never mind what part of health. So that's the first thing you have to do, is actually hold their feet to the fire and say this money is for health, we should be spending it on health. And thereafter, as a Glasgow representative, I feel very strongly about community health. As someone that works in a hospital, I see the impact of community health going wrong all the time. I mean, that's why it's clogged. I mean, let's face it, those ambulances that are parked outside A&E and Queen Elizabeth Hospital and can't get in, you can trace it all back to community health. So I'm absolutely in support of that.
Okay, well that would be welcome, if that's specific support. And Chris, just before I bring Rose and Cathy in terms of that partnership approach that we have with Scottish Government with the employers, it's fair to say that's under a lot of strain at the moment with these budget cuts, and this branch can committee is very restless at the moment about the fact that on this issue and several other issues we haven't had the type of response from the Scottish Government that we would expect. Is that something that you're willing to take back if you're elected, or even if you're not elected, to make clear that this branch expects better from the Scottish Government?
Well, regardless of the outcome next Thursday, yes, because but I would hope it would be an elected position, because I am the trade union link with the Westminster Group and the trade unions. So I am often the 999 service for the trade unions when things do go wrong. So I do get the phone call, and then I have to make the phone call with special advisors and government ministers. And I will be taking it back, because I am an advocate of a social partnership model when it comes to the trade union movement and the Scottish Government. I think that has to take place, and I think that and the benefits of it are actually twofold. When there's a crisis, I think it should work well, and when things are good, it should work well. And if that has been broken down, then I'd be keen to fix that so that we can go forward and have those sorts of discussions, because it's important that interplay between the trade union movement and the people on the ground who understand what's going on at ground level is fed back up to people at government level. I don't expect the government ministers to know absolutely what's going to happen in Ward 6 at the Southern General Hospital, but it's our duty as elected representatives and the trade unions to feed that back to say, this is what's happening in Ward 6 and we need to fix it.
And I'll just bring in Rose Anderson, branch chair. If you could unmute, please.
Yeah, sorry I can't be there today, I'm not very well. I've got two questions for you. The first question is relating to partnership. Right now, we used to have a good partnership with the board, but that's going down, that's gone. I mean, the cuts that they want to introduce and they put in place, the things that they want to do just now, we cannot agree to most there. So that's now putting a strain. The other thing that I want to bring up is, and see if any of you can answer this for me, I'd really like to know the answer to this, is that I'm all for reducing working week. But one of the things that's came up in the reduced working week is that the staff now who work full time are going from 37.5 hours to 37, but no backfill on that. Right, that is putting a lot of strain on the staff who can't get to leave at the half an hour that they were supposed to leave, or still there is no backfill to fill in. So if you're a domestic, or you're a porter, or you're a caterer and facilities, so you understand, if you're doing that, that's a half an hour off the ward that's getting cleaned, but they still expect that ward to be cleaned, but no funds have came from the Scottish Government to put this half an hour back in. So that's going to cause a lot of trouble, and that is also putting a lot of strain on our staff. So our staff are already at breaking point with the amount of jobs that they've got to do, let alone putting extra work onto them and giving them less time to do it. So if you came in place, or any of you, if you are lucky, whoever gets in, would you look at putting backfill in for that?
Zubir?
So Rose, thanks for everything you do. We obviously need you guys and everything we do in the hospitals, you know, and we know what happens when the porters aren't there to move the patients from A&E to the theatre to the ward. You know, things don't work, okay? And if you're telling me now that there's less time for them to do that, and the intensity of work is going up, we can all sympathise with that, because I think that's sometimes what goes wrong when you reduce hours in healthcare, isn't it? You think you can just squeeze the work into the less hours. I mean, I think whether it's facilities or nursing staff or doctors have all had the brunt of that. The honest answer is, from Westminster, you know, there's not a lot we can do about that, apart from obviously be your advocate and communicate that, you know, back to the Scottish Government when you're having your negotiations, right? Because it rests with them, the minutiae of this. But I certainly think we'll be holding the health board to account. You know, it's not a functional health board, GG&C, right now. You know, there's a lot of leadership changes going on. They're inwardly facing. I personally, you know, even though I work for them, I'm feeling pretty disenfranchised with them, to be honest with you. It's not something you can always say in public, you know, especially when you work for them, but that's where I'm at. And you know what did it for me was during COVID, when they gave themselves an award or whatever it was. Do you remember that? And they were like, best team or something. It was a management team. I just couldn't believe, So that tells you where they're at. So I think until we get, to be honest, a management clear out, these kind of small issues are not going to come to light. And we're working hard. I know in the Scottish Parliament as a party, I'll continue to work hard. As an MP, I'm honoured to be one. But the honest answer is that I can't, because it's not part of our legislative power to tell you that I can definitely get you this half an hour back. That's the honest truth. But I will stand with you for sure.
Just challenge that a wee bit. There's a high level aspiration amongst all the boards in Scotland to reduce the headcount amongst facilities and administrative staff. And with an ageing and sicklier population after COVID, more money is fundamentally important. So that is the big lever in Westminster, is making sure that there's proper funding.
Well, there is proper funding, but I think it's also how you arrange your work, right? I mean, obviously, more doctors and nurses always takes the headlines, all right? But we can't do our work without you guys. And in fact, in some ways, we need more facilities and more admin, not less. And I think when it comes to workforce planning, I think we've got to understand, a little bit, how many specialists do we actually need? Because at the moment, a lot of specialist time has been taken up by admin, by poor infrastructure, and instead of just saying we're going to have more specialists, I think we actually have to have an honest conversation. How many specialists do we need? How much value can we extract from those specialists? And I think to extract value from those specialists, we actually need more admin and facility staff. So I'm very keen for that conversation to happen. Yes, with money, but also how we actually structure the service.
Carolyn and then Chris.
Can I just,
Sorry, go ahead, Rose.
Lachlan, can I just come back on that? And it's just, I mean, you're talking about specialists. I think you need to look at how much management you need. There's more management out there than there is staff. So I think that's one of your big points.
Yeah, I don't understand why in this country, why management is almost like a specialist entity in a hospital. Like, people that work in a hospital, that understand the hospital, should run a hospital, not a separate entity. That's what, to be honest, I don't take many lessons from the States around healthcare, okay, for obvious reasons. But one lesson I do take is see that when medical people are in charge of hospitals, they seem to work and function better. And I think that's what we need to get to. And also, and I know it's not part of your question, but I want to get this point across because I think it's really important. Medical managers or managers in hospitals are the only people that never have to be accountable for their actions. We all have to be. We've got regulatory bodies. We can get struck off. We can get sanctioned. They can do almost anything they like, take major decisions and have no accountability, and just can move to the next post. And as a Labour government in Westminster, I'm certainly very committed, and I know the Health Department is very committed to get that kind of accountability and regulatory framework over these managers. Because otherwise, I don't think we're going to see any improvements around whistleblowing, around serious adverse events.
Before the intervention of the union around the cuts in the HSEP, they were going to cut so many health visitors that they would have been a breach of the recommendations of the Fatal Accident Inquiry and the Lauren Wade case. That cut of 21 health visitors is now down to between 6 and 8. So we're still battling to bring that to 0, but that shows the extremity of the situation. So Carolyn, in answer to Rose's question, then Chris, and then I'll bring in Kathy and then after that. So Carolyn.
Thanks, Rose. I hope you're feeling better soon. I certainly experienced among our pharmacy, cancer nurse specialists in where I work, that they have also experienced this half-hour cut in their working week. And as you say, I welcome a cut back on the time that they have to spend at work, but it's the equivalent of another whole-time post that has not been backfilled. So, and just as you say, they're staying late to finish their work, they're spreading it or trying to spread it out through the rest of the week. They're not actually taking that half hour back, are they? They're just not getting paid for the work that they're doing, unfortunately. And so I think it is, I would certainly support it leading to the creation of new posts to backfill that, absolutely. It shouldn't be that we revert back to 37.5 just because people can't take it. It should be that we support them to work less hours by creating extra capacity in the system. And that I come back to all the money chat that I did a minute ago, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but yes, absolutely support your point. Thanks, Rose.
Thanks, Carolyn and Chris. That's before bring Kathy.
Yeah, thanks. Rose, I hope that was not something you picked up in writing. Can I say that it was something you picked up in writing, okay. It was a Unison conference last week for those who don't know.
That definitely was Brighton.
Okay, well, all right. Well, we'll come back to Brighton maybe another time. My uncle is a retired porter. He is a retired member of this branch. He looks 10 years younger since he retired, incidentally. So, as many people do. But I think that the issue for me as an elected member is that when you're not dealing with directly elected bodies, you're dealing with these boards, is one of accountability. And I think that that's something I certainly want to take, that I'm certainly taking back. It was one of the things that I've written down, is there seems to be, as others have said, that we have a health board who sometimes give the impression that they're not accountable to anybody, and I think that it's incumbent on all of us who are in elected office to hold them accountable. And it seems that that's where the social partnership model is falling down. It seems to be with the board level, as you've identified. And I think that what you've picked as an example is a lack of workforce planning. If there is a reduction in the working week and they're not backfilling, well, I want to know what the workforce planning arrangements is going forward, because I would want to ensure, we shouldn't be in a position, frankly, if we are reducing the working week, that things are being missed. That's not the purpose of the exercise in reducing the working week. The point of reducing the working week is to help workers recover from the hours that they do, and to lead a normal life, and to have that work-life balance that we all should have, says someone who works 14 hours a day. But putting that aside, that's my job, I accept that, but that's what we have to do, is that workforce planning. And I'm certainly going to take away already, I'm getting what I suspected as someone elected in this city, is that we seem to have a health board that's completely and utterly accountable. And as far as managers are concerned, my Unison trade union training tells me never to trust a manager. We all know when the manager says, it's all right, come into this meeting, you don't need a trade union, that's exactly when you phone your trade union rep.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Kathy Miller, Brand Secretary.
Good evening. I don't know where to start. I really don't. I have been a nurse for 45 years.
Wow.
And I'm hearing the same old rubbish that I've heard when Labour was running, and then when the SNP came in. We are not overspent. We are underfunded. And in the acute wards, they are cutting healthcare assistants, reducing them, and also reducing our trained staff. And can I just say, we are a trade union. Did you know how much that impacts on patient care? As you say, if your relatives, if your mother, father, cousin, anybody's in, the type of treatment that we're getting from Glasgow, with the cuts that they are putting in, are putting the people of Glasgow in danger for healthcare. They're making cuts. And see your specialist people, by the way, it was government that put all these specialists in. They argued with us it was the way forward, it was wonderful, it was the best thing to do. When they built the Queen Elizabeth, my God, that ship was sailing. And it's a bigger mess now than it ever was when we had the independent hospitals for people and for people travelling and everything else. But I can assure you, in all my years, I have never seen worse conditions and low morale of our staff due to the way they are treated. Now, can I just remind you, I know we're talking about the boards and we're talking about management, but can I just remind you, people in government are their managers, so they must be telling them what to do, and you will not convince me that the government doesn't know about these cuts in HSCP and in acute, because we raise it time and time and time again. So you can understand people are really, really disappointed. I've not heard anything from any of you tonight that makes me feel any better. But we're in a battle, we haven't won the war yet. But you will not privatise our health service, because we will go on the streets and we will fight, and you can take that back to everybody, wherever you are going, I don't really care. But what you need to address just now is the cuts in the staffing in Glasgow. You need to address that ASAP. When you gave us the half hour, if you've got a ward, right, this is a small ward, say with 35 patients, you would need to take 22 hours a week out of that ward. That means the patients in that ward, if you take 22 22 hours. And if you take those hours out, that impacts on patient care. And believe me, I know how hard it is to deliver patient care. I have nursed long enough in acute to know what's going on. And I fight this on a daily basis. But it's wrong that I've got to go in every day and say, you can't cut that staff. You need to put somebody else back in there. The basic submission, you need to start again right from the bottom with a foundation, but it's absolutely appalling. And by the way, partnership working, okay? We can leave your partnership working because it doesn't exist in GGC. And we can go and back and work in all trade union values and probably do a better job. GGC partnership working does not exist. It's dead. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathy. I'll say as chair that, strictly speaking, that wasn't a question, but that's all great stuff. So I think apart from that.
Sorry, I did say, are you going to take it back? I mean, I did say that.
Are you going to
take it back?
Are you going to take it back to your parties?
Kathy, you should run for office after that, quite frankly.
We need
but what's your, well, that was said to me, but I was branch treasurer at the time when I was signing strike paychecks the day I got elected. Kathy, what you've expressed very well, as you always do representing this branch, is the voice of the membership, and so it's very, very important that takes place. I think it's very clear from question 1 that there's a real problem around accountability with how Glasgow and Clyde conduct its business. So I think that's already very clear, and I know that I will, and I'm sure the other public representatives will be telling their MSPs that was made very, 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 very clear to us tonight. But your fundamental point, I think, is this, and I'm quite frustrated with the general election campaign, especially when I get home and I'm watching the news and it's who's up and who's down or who's been at the bookies that day. That's not what the general election should be about, frankly. It should be about the issues. And for me, the biggest issue is public investment. Now, I'm not going to pretend to anybody the challenges that the next Parliament will have, no matter what its makeup. It's going to spend a lot of money on infected blood compensation, on compensation for post office workers, on equitable life. It should do the same for WASPI. That should happen. And it's right that those individuals are compensated for what happens. But what we need is a serious discussion about how we raise the money that funds our public services adequately. And I think that that's something that I am really, really surprised and really, really frustrated hasn't come out in the general election campaign so far, because you're absolutely right. It comes about money, it comes about raising that money and making sure that that money goes to the right place.
Carol?
Thanks very much, Kathy. Can hear all your passion and frustration and share it. I would agree that if they attempt to privatise the health system, I'll be out on the streets with you. Certainly that's something that we all want to defend and protect. It's a big part of why I'm standing, to be honest. But the bit that I'm taking away from what you said is we are not overspent, we are underfunded, which I 100% agree with. It needs more money, and I've already said what I think that the Scottish Greens would want to do, but I agree with Chris that that's never really been discussed within this election campaign, and it is really frustrating to hear the big parties appear to dodge that because they don't want to be unpopular in bits of England where, to be honest, more affluent people live. So yeah, I remain frustrated. I think that our public services in general and health service in particular has been stripped back past the bone and needs more money, needs more resource. I work on wards where I see, pretty risky staffing ratios because we're left stripped right back. So yeah, 100% agree with what you're saying, and thank you for all that you've done.
Zubir, and then we'll.
Well, Kathy, as a junior doctor, you were the kind of nurse I would never have messed with, and as a political candidate, I'm still not going to mess with you, okay? So, to your first point, yeah, I mean, the problem is we're talking about stopping privatisation of the health service, but I'm afraid it's already been privatised in a lot of ways, hasn't it? And that's the problem. When we look, if you have a health service where 30–40% of your population is tipping out their life savings to go and get a hip replacement because they can't stand the pain, that's not a health service, it's there for them. If the health service is spending increasing amounts of money, you know, putting sticking plasters on their staffing budgets by bringing in external agencies, that's kind of privatisation really. So we're already there, unfortunately, and we have to stop it. And the way we stop it is by making sure it's free at the point of care. And what I would say to you in terms of, I understand your anger that things never change, but things weren't always like this, like you said. I remember as a medical student in the Victoria Infirmary, I took a summer job as a medical secretary. I learned a lot during that job, actually. And I used to take phone calls from GPs to make endoscopy appointments. And I remember in 2000, the year 2000, me opening the diary for 2002 for them to get an endoscopy. Two years. By the time I was a surgical registrar in Paisley, 5 years later, you know, we managed to get that down to a few weeks. We were phoning patients, asking them if they wanted to come in for an endoscopy. So what I'm saying is, different governments can make different decisions, and we can get back to that point. Of course we need funding, of course we need an honest discussion how we make that funding happen. And to be honest, what I think that needs to happen is we need to look at the wealth in this country and how we mobilise that for the public good, whether it's non-dom tax status, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's personal wealth. Because when we talk about income tax, I don't think that's going to cut it, to be quite honest. Because at the moment, all we're doing in this country is bringing in working people into those tax bands that we've increased compared to England. And I'm not sure that's particularly fair, particularly when we know there's been independent evidence that's not going to generate any more money. So I think it's the wealth we have to go after, and we have to go after it through a systematic way. And I think we are doing that. We're starting to do that.
Sorry, can I come back on you a wee bit about privatisation? When Labour was in and they built the ACADs, and they put our facilities out and our estates out, and Malcolm Chisholm was in at the time, and we haunted that man. We haunted him at partnership meetings, we haunted him everywhere. And what Glasgow managed to do was bring in the facilities in-house, under the NHS, and not out to a private contractor. And it has worked that way since the day and hour the ACADs open. So you don't need privatisation if you do it properly. And we were part of the team bringing in the facility staff under the family of the NHS, so that they didn't feel when the private firms were in, they were totally didn't feel part of the NHS because they were a private firm. And even the day that we were bringing them in, we made sure they had NHS uniforms. Yeah. So please don't tell me we need private. We've proved it.
I wasn't telling you needed private.
Sodexo, we brought that in-house, and it has worked amazingly well. And you now have the loyalty of those staff are so loyal to the NHS because they were brought in-house, they weren't put out. A private firm could go round, Sodexo could go round one morning, tap them in the shoulder and tell them they were finished.
Kathy.
We changed all that so we can fix it, I'm sorry.
Kathy, you're completely right, but I think Zubir might have to speak up a wee bit because he was saying he's against privatisation, and we'll hold him to that as well, so that's good.
I never heard that.
I think Zubir.
My point was, we've gone too far down that line already. You know, because we should be talking about it's going to happen. It's happening, and we need to work out a way to stop it. You know what I mean? Like, particularly when it's people paying for private care, because that's basically the haves and the have-nots. Basically, that's the basic principle of the NHS being eroded right in front of our eyes.
Thank you, Zubir. Right, this points to my inefficiency as a chair, because technically we're still on question one.
So you can't mess with Kathy.
Absolutely not. So Diana, and then Anne, and after that we'll move on to the second set of questions. So Diana.
Hi, I'm an occupational therapist. I work in mental health for Inverclyde HSCP. We can't get staff. All the savings that our HSCP is making is because there are staff vacancies. The staff don't exist. We can't get mental health nurses, we can't get psychiatrists, we can't get GPs, we can't get other occupational therapists. The staff don't exist. Do you plan to train some more staff? Because at the moment, saying more money is just paying for agency and privatisation by the back door.
Carol, first, please.
Thanks very much for your question. Yep, we encounter this a lot. I think across the board, certainly in the Beatson where I work, there's vacancies that are underfilled, and as you say, management are just clawing that money back, and the rest of us are trying to scrap around to cover the work. Certainly we need to train more people. Certainly we need to make sure that we also have a way to permit people to come and work in this country, because we are dependent on that, and so we do need a migrant workforce. We need a better way to train people that are here, but we've got an aging population, demographics are against us. We do need to also encourage people to come and live and work here too, and obviously we have a government at Westminster that's hostile to that, and we need to be able to depart from that and have a more welcoming, permissive environment, and allow people to live here more securely, to be able to bring their families here. But absolutely, you're quite right. If there's no point in creating money if we can't then get people to fill the role. So we need to be able to train people, we need to be able to encourage people to live here too.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for that, Diana. I think you're articulating the very real concerns, not just in health, but right across public services, when you see vacant posts remain vacant and other people having to pick up the slack. And I do think that that's something that has to be taken back to the Scottish Government and wider afield with the Health Board, is to explain the pressures and also to explain the pressures that means for people's families and the people who are waiting for that service, and you're not able to get an appointment. So I think that does need to happen. But I do think that we need to have a conversation, as Caroline has said, is that we're looking at trying to bring people in. I found it extraordinary that the UK government was saying to people who wanted to come in and work visas here, you can come in but not your families. I just found that completely and utterly a completely ludicrous position, because the family members, the assumption the UK government made is that the person would come in and work, but the rest of the family wouldn't work, that they'd somehow claim universal credit. Complete and utter nonsense. We keep being told by the UK government there are 2 million vacancies. So let's go on and try and fill some of these vacancies, and if we need to bring people in who can do the job from overseas, then we should do that, and we should create the conditions where that can happen.
Thanks very much. Zubir?
Yeah, I mean, so Diana totally resonates in terms of policy, and UK Labour government is committed in print to increasing medical school places, increasing nursing school places. That will have both a direct and indirect impact on Scotland, because people can move around and work here, and many people do choose Scotland. To your wider point about vacancies and how we fill them in the short term, you'll never hear me as the son of an immigrant making the case for immigration to become harder. Okay, I'm not one of those people. But we have to be honest about what the issues are with recruitment. We are hemorrhaging staff. We can't keep staff. This isn't about recruiting more staff from abroad. This is what we're doing wrong as an institution that's making our staff run away. And because they are taking with them hundreds of years of cumulative experience. So it's not just the fact that they're leaving, it's the fact that they're unable then to train the next generation. We're losing cultural memory, and that is the biggest asset of the National Health Service. When we talk about asset stripping, when staff leave, that's your asset strip. It's not selling a building or doing something else. So we have to understand deeply why they're leaving. Of course it's pay, but it's other things that we've talked about today. Because we're in a bizarre situation where we train junior doctors here, and they go to Australia and New Zealand, and then we import our junior doctors from the Indian subcontinent, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from India. And I can tell you, because I had an interview last week, 2 weeks ago, for a junior doctor in our department. We had 90 applicants, but none of them from this country. So there's a problem we need to talk about. Why are people in this country not wanting to work in the health service here and wanting to leave? I think that's the primary issue right now, that we need to address.
Thanks, Zubir. Lisa, you have a chance to
Mr. Ahmed talked about stopping privatization, but we already know Keir Starmer has approved privatization to keep going on. So one of you is not being honest yet. Is it you or is it him?
So privatization is not using private firms. We've always used private firms. We've always had to have interaction with private industry. That's something that's happened since the birth of the NHS. We can't do everything ourselves. But this alludes to Kathy's point earlier. It's who's in control of that relationship and who's got the upper hand that's really important. I agree with Kathy. Both Labour and Conservative governments have made mistakes in the past in that regard as to who holds the power in that relationship. And too often it's not been us, and it's not been the National Health Service. When we're proposing the use of private hospitals in England, by the way, we're not doing anything different to what the SNP government is doing here, which is block booked most private hospitals in Scotland to deliver NHS care. That's what we're talking about. Because when we come in if we come in as a government, we have a decision to make. We have a decision to make while we try and build infrastructure back up the NHS. What do we do with the patients that are in the pipeline already? The patients that have been waiting 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years for a hip replacement, for a knee replacement, for a hernia operation. Do we make them wait longer, or do we use the capacity we already have? I think it's a no-brainer to use that capacity, particularly if we can negotiate hard with them about the price and we can use it at the same tariff as we would get in an NHS hospital. But how we then go forward in terms of building capacity in the National Health Service is where we and the Conservatives differ. Because the Conservatives never believed in the NHS, we do, and it sometimes feels, sometimes the SNP currently in Scotland don't care about it. My position and the UK Labour government's position is entirely the same. We always need to have a relationship with private industry and private hospitals, and that is happening right now in NHS England and in NHS Scotland. The question is, who has the upper hand and who controls the engine room of that relationship? And it should be us, and I'll make sure it's us.
Thanks, Alireza. Who's a domestic in that?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And we're going to move on, Kathy, to pay after this. So if we could hold your question, that would be great. Anne, do you want to come on there, please?
Yes, good evening, panel, and thank you very much for being there to answer some questions. And I'd be quite happy to be in the room since I have all these experience, junior doctors and people that work for the NHS. If anything went wrong with me, I would assume you'd be able to help me. I've got a couple of questions, if you could possibly answer. We talked about the acute and the hospitals and how busy they are, but in reality, if we could clear the over 200 plus beds that patients do not have to be in Greater Glasgow and Clyde hospitals and be put back into the community, would we say that some more money or more money should be going into social care and funding the local government to have these facilities so that the patients that are in hospital can be released into their own homes and cared for in their own homes? And my second question is, the great NHS has been about for 70 plus years now. Is there some new way or new technology that we should be funding or advancements in to see our NHS look into the future? So that's my two questions. Bed blocking in the acute, not enough money for our social care, and is the NHS, do we need to look forward to how we can be an NHS of the future? Sorry, 3 questions.
So I'll ask, especially difficult, it's 3 questions just so we can move on. If you can do that longer a minute each.
Well, bed keep it short. Bed blocking absolutely has to be community focused. That's the only way we're going to stop our hospitals from being clogged, especially with an ageing population. There's no way around that. So anything that needs to happen in the community to increase funding, right behind it. Future of the NHS, great question. I think the answer is we need to really upscale our digital spine in the NHS in Scotland. We're really behind NHS England actually in that regard. You guys don't have an app on your phone where you can look up your results. I think that's ridiculous in 2024. We're still waiting for snail mail to get your appointments. Ridiculous. And many of my patients miss their appointments because the poster doesn't turn up. I just can't fathom this. So that needs to be upscaled quickly. And actually, the model of the NHS, how we work, the data we have, what we do, is a real financial asset, I think, to the world. We should not be scared of monetizing it and selling our expertise to the world, right? This is how we do healthcare, because we have to generate income for our patients. And we are just holding on to so much of our expertise and we're not sharing it with the world. Look at TfL. They built the Oyster card. They sold it to the world. They're making lots of money selling it to Singapore, to Hong Kong, all these places, and that money's getting pumped back into the transport system of London. We should be doing the same thing with the NHS. We shouldn't be scared about holding on to our assets in that regard, intellectual property.
Yeah. And again, if you can try it for a minute there. So Chris?
Well, asking me to answer a question under a minute will be difficult, walking, but can I say, I just think sometimes that I get worried about the phrase bed blocking because sometimes it's not fair. It's certainly not fair my friend who's in hospital at the moment and can't be released because he lives in a tenemental building and there's no way he could be sent back into that tenemental building. So I think that some of that, Anne, has to be other public services having a discussion with health, for example, housing, because you know, Bill, who's been stuck for 7 weeks now, trying to find out, you know, if he can move house, if there's a house available for him that's in the ground floor. It's not fair on him because I wouldn't class him as a bed blocker, but some people would. But I think the point you're making is that, you know, as I've said, public services need to talk to each other about that. And I think the vision of the NHS should be the same vision as every other public service, continuous improvement, whether that's digital, whether that's how we do things. We should always pursue world-class public services, because that's what Unison taught me, should always be the policy, is to pursue world-class public service.
Thanks, Christopher. Carol?
Thanks very much for the questions. I'm hoping I got them all. But so patients who are stuck in a bed when they want to be at home, they want to be in their whatever their residential setting is going to be. Nobody wants to be there in that situation, and it, as Chris has alluded to, it requires all sorts of different strands. But I'm asked to keep this brief, so I better not stray too much. But it'll often require more OT, more physio input, better pharmacy input to get things rapidly turned around for patients getting home, and of course it requires carers when the patient gets home. Not everyone requires that, but we don't have enough carers for those who do. We've got patients sitting waiting for a package of care and no carers to deliver it. We need to make sure that care is an attractive job, that it's paid well, and that we have enough, let's be honest, skilled workers who can do that role. In terms of future advances for the health system, I'm really intrigued by this question. It's not something I've thought of before. I know that certainly in oncology and cancer treatment where I work, there are loads of rapid technological advances, but they all cost loads of money. So I think the problem's going to be, can we keep up with the financial demand? But in some ways, my role as an oncologist is going to be replaced a wee bit by a robot, I think, where they're going to be planning everyone's radiotherapy without me. And I think that there will be ways in which automation can help free up clinicians to do the bit that we enjoy, the face-to-face patient care. And it may well be that more, you know, that's going to snowball in the near future. And if we can financially keep up to invest in it, then that may well be a big advance that helps our diagnostics, our treatments, all aspects of healthcare.
Thanks, Carolyn. So I'm going to change the order of the set questions a wee bit, and apologies, Kathy and Francis, I'm not going to call you just yet. So there's over 4,000 members of this branch that don't work for the NHS. They work for care providers like Erskine or Enable or the Mungo Foundation, or a large number of providers that aren't properly unionised yet, and that's something that we're working hard on. This might be something that you want to come on in a second, Ross, but the Scottish Government made a lot of quite exciting pledges in discussion with Unison and other trade unions a number of years ago about bringing in proper sectoral bargaining and investing in seriously improving pay terms and conditions, including things like bringing in proper sick pay, which most care workers outside the NHS don't have, improved annual leave, and all these things are of massive systemic importance. That's not been delivered on, and a lot of that money has been redirected without explanation. This is the Missing Millions campaign that's getting on at the moment. So I suppose, and I'll see if Ross wants to add anything to this as a care worker for Enable. What is the Scottish Government going to do, what's the SNP going to do to deliver on that? And given that Labour is pledging to do something like this in England, what are you going to do to actually deliver on that in a way that hopefully generates useful ballot consequentials and shows that this can be done? So that's a sort of multifaceted question myself. Ross, is there anything you want to add to that?
Not obviously. Obviously, like yes, like you've got a new leader now, right? Like I was actually there at Holyrood when Hamza Yusuf's answer to are we going to get a pay rise as care workers was basically, well, we've just increased the living wage, which isn't really acceptable because we shouldn't be living wage employers. So hopefully with John Swinney in, basically, you know, we're an absolute bargain basically. If you put the money into social care, it might take a few years to kind of sort everything out. Then like you'd alleviate so much pressure on the NHS, but it barely ever gets talked about. Like thank God, like kind of like there's actually this SDUC thing now. But it's basically just want to see from all the parties really And it's very easy to kind of say these things, but you literally just need to get started on it.
Chris?
Okay, so help is at hand, and I think that one of the things that pleases me most is one of the people the Scottish Government has hired to look at collective and sectorial bargaining is Professor Keith Ewing. And Professor Keith Ewing is the employment law god of the United Kingdom. This is a guy who's an eminent professor at Oxford University. The Institute of Employment Rights has developed trade union policies in this area, developed the SNP manifesto, developed the 2019 Labour manifesto. Help is at hand. Now, I think the frustration for me is that the private sector interests have been doing everything they can to stop some of the progress around this. But you have the eminent professor of sectorial and collective bargaining who's now working on this. You couldn't get a better guy in the room. And I'll certainly be taken back that the frustrations of how slow this is going, and I'll also be speaking to Keith Ewing about speeding it up as well, because Keith is someone who, like me, is a huge advocate of sectorial and collective bargaining. Why is that the case? Because in 1979, 80% of Scotland's workers were paid under some sort of sectorial and collective bargaining arrangement. That figure is now 29% in Scotland. And I think that we need to, so the Scottish Government's got a job to do to create it in this area, but we need to look at collective sectorial bargaining right across the economy, because it's the only way we will deal with this issue where work doesn't pay. And I think that you need to ensure that we have good wages in this country, because that also contributes. And your final point that you made about if we get this right, money can be spent in other areas, I think it's fine. Just the same as unpaid carers, for example, are contributing billions to the economy. I think if we can get this right, you're absolutely spot on. That money can go elsewhere in other public services.
Decent answer.
Well, that's fine, but apart from money right now would actually help. Like the different care companies, obviously, Enable has kind of a good like paternity leave, sick pay, and so on. The other ones are paying more hourly. Like kind of they have to spend the money. Like obviously a lot of these companies have far too big reserves and stuff, but they do actually like want to attract people because there's an absolute like we can't recruit people.
No,
like it's all right to get
Ross.
some big wit to come in and sort out things in the long run, but you can literally just put money into it now.
You're right, those good employers, it's sadly in the care sector that aren't. And I know things like, for example...
But even the bad employers will, if they're given more money, will put some of that money into wages, because they're doing that in order to...
they should. They should.
I'm glad they're doing it, but I'm just...
Ross, your faith in employers, I'm afraid, is something I share, particularly in the private sector. And things like, for example, even basic things like short notice shift changes is something that really gets on my wick, is that you have people, and when I put my private members bill together on workers' rights, one of the key examples was the care sector, of people turning up at work, expecting they've got a 5-hour shift, who are then told either that, sorry, it's a 10-hour shift, or sorry, we don't need you today. Now we need to look at all of that, because that's exactly what happens to some people in the care sector, because you have people who turn up for work, they're paid their childcare costs, they're paid their transport costs, and then they're told either they don't have a shift today, or you're working a 10-hour shift and they then have to pay out more money. I think there should be penalties for employers around that. In law, that there should be, that to me is double time. So if you're told that, if you're told you're working more hours, or you're no longer required, employers should still be stumping up. I'm afraid I don't share, Ross, your faith in private sector employers.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I said
Yes.
what I
Right.
said was
You're limited to-
give them more money, they will increase the wages.
Well, they
It's
should.
just empirically that's what we've observed.
Well, they should.
And I can see Zubir to come in, so...
No, I agree with everything that Chris has said, and also I think this is where it's really important. We've got someone like Angela Rayner at the top of our leadership. She has been a care worker, she knows what it's like. She's championed the Workers' Rights Charter. So things like fire and rehire, like the 0 hours contract situation that Chris was alluding to, that's going to be in a bill in the first 100 days of the Labour government. And like with all things, when it goes through its legislative processes, the devil will be in the detail around a lot of these things, particularly how we sanction employers, how we get them to cow to the legislation. And I'm 100% supportive of that bill, and I think that will address a lot of the issues you talk about. And again, we've seen the Tories trying to reverse a lot of legislation around strikes and minimum service, not always directly affecting care workers and healthcare workers, but they've tried to, even through the junior doctor strike.
Yeah.
They tried to do it. And I've been a junior doctor that's been on the picket line outside St Thomas's Hospital in 2015, so I've been on the other side as well, so I understand that. And so we've got to be really careful about protecting unionised rights. And I certainly will be doing that.
Thanks. Apologies, Karen, we're going to just move on to the next question, but I think there's some reassurance there around getting somebody who's a respected expert in collective bargaining and to design that structure. But the thread on through a lot of these conversations is we need more money to resolve these problems. We need more money, and that's something that needs to be taken back very powerfully. The next question, just swinging back to the NHS, is around the pay settlement for this year. So there's a huge amount of anger at the front line about the fact there is still no pay offer from the Scottish Government. There's still no pay offer from the UK Government either in England. And I think we had a bit of debate in the room beforehand about the best way I asked this question, but we're a bit cheeky and ask all of you, what percentage rise do you think health workers should get? Is your party going to deliver on that if elected? So, Zubir?
I think it's very variable depending on what job you're doing, right? Because you can ask me as a consultant surgeon, what percentage rise should I get? It kind of feels a bit wrong to ask for like a 5 or 10% rise when.
May I clarify the question? So at bands 2 to 7,
yeah.
Say what should be the pay rate?
Well, I think it's got to be inflation at least, and inflation over the last year or so. But more than that, you've got to look at the structure of those payments and the banding and the ability to go up and down these bandings, because a lot of people are being held in a band and not being allowed to progress to the next band despite doing the work that's manifestly above their band. So, it's got to be a bit of headline rate increase, but actually then getting into the nitty gritty, and again through legislation, compelling employers, NHS boards, through some kind of process, both unionised and legal, to say if you can demonstrate you're working above your band, you will need to pay it. Because I see it a lot in nursing staff and HCPs, doing very skilled work, very intimate work, and not getting the pay progress that they deserve.
So Labour have started the button at inflation plus. You may be deselected tomorrow morning if this gets out.
Well, I said recent inflation. I wasn't talking about 10% that we were running at last year. But,
that was the detail there because I could only do 2.1% based on what Zubir is saying. So, Chris?
I would never tell a trade union what percentage would be for a rise, and I was disappointed in you, Lockin, as a lead negotiator, because sometimes percentage rises aren't always the best approach.
Right.
You have to look at, for example, flat rate claims, because that sometimes helps people more, particularly at the bottom. But I think the key point I would make around public sector pay is, and I've been banging this drum for at least 20 years, is that we know at the very least 70 pence in every pound of public money ends up in the private sector economy. And so when you cut public sector pay, or you try to cap public sector pay, that doesn't just impact on those workers, it impacts in the wider economy. So I think that you have to ensure that there's good public sector pay, it's good economically, and you also have to talk the benefits of that, because what I find that Conservatives do, in particular when they talk about public sector pay caps, for example, is that they all give you the impression that what these public sector workers do when they get pay rises, they put it in a shoebox and hide it under their bed, and it doesn't end up in the wider economy. I would never instruct or tell a trade union what rise they should accept, because they would tell me to go and whistle. But I think that the wider point is we need decent public pay, and there are far too many people in the economy, and I'll tell you now, people who work in DWP in the Home Office, they're being paid the national minimum wage, and I think that that's actually disgraceful that your government workers being paid such low poverty wages.
So before Carolyn comes in, take your point as well about the structure of the pay claim as well, didn't want to get to that level of technicality in the question. I get your point. Scottish public sector pay policy at the moment would allow for a 3% rise, with only 2% paid out up front with 1% later in the year. Do you think, and I'll move on to Carol in a second as well, do you think that the Scottish Government needs to pay more than that to health workers in Scotland?
Ideally, yes. I do respect the fact that that is something that has to be looked at. But then, of course, I could give you a percentage figure that would, if I did give you the public, a percentage figure that I think all public sector workers should be paid. It might be put back to me that there wouldn't be any money left.
But the SNP candidate here tonight, the Scottish Government needs to do substantially better than public sector pay policy to address a lot of the crises.
Well, I think it has to. Well, as you said at the beginning, it is paying more than other workers in other parts, and that includes Social Security Scotland, for example, which is why people from DWP are coming in. But I think that we have to take seriously public sector pay and the benefits of public sector pay, and I think that if it's only 3%, I think that both trade union pressure and political pressure may move the Scottish Government.
I think you're going to have to do something there, because we're not keeping staff, right? So if you're not keeping staff, you know, something is wrong, and part of it is pay. And I think when you're having these negotiations with pay, and especially when you're on the government side, you need your guys to be doing the modelling about how much money are you hemorrhaging on the other end by paying, you know, temporary staff and other folks like that. And suddenly, when you have that opportunity cost in front of you, then suddenly paying public sector staff a little bit more, you know, it makes financial sense as well as ethical sense. So, you know, at the moment something is wrong, isn't it? And we're not retaining staff and they're going elsewhere. You know, it clearly means that in certain aspects of public sector and in the health sector, not all, but in some, you know, the pay is not enough. And particularly care, and I tried to join Unison once actually, and I was knocked back because I was told as a doctor they couldn't represent me. So I ended up with a GMB. So we're all friends here, okay?
Sorry.
And you know, I'm fully supportive of care workers and £15 an hour as a starting point, because care particularly, we're not paying care workers enough, right, for the skills that they have. I feel so passionately about that, particularly as someone that's cared for my grandmother, watched carers come into my grandmother, took care of my grandmother who lived with us for 9 years. And that's what really opened my eyes, actually, not being a doctor, it's actually watching them with my grandmother opened my eyes to what care workers do. And something is desperately wrong with how we treat care workers in this country, both in terms of pay, but how we kind of look upon them as professionals. Because we don't look upon them as professionals, that's the problem. You know? So, you know, yeah. So certainly with care workers, yeah, we need to pay them a hell of a lot more out there in the community.
Carol?
Thank you. I've crossed all my line, which was, I'm not going to tell a trade union what to ask for in terms of pay increase, but certainly public sector jobs pay is part of why we're not retaining people, and it does need to be action for it, otherwise it doesn't pay people's spend, outstrips what they can earn. But a lot of why we're losing people is the conditions that we're working in and the workload that people are asked to commit to because of vacancies, because of us covering for people whose jobs aren't filled. It's not all about pay, although of course that's a big part. We need to be valued, we need to be properly remunerated, but we also need to have enough people to do the job. And I come back to my ask that we increase the investment into healthcare and the consequentials down to the Scottish Government and thereon, because that's how we fund those roles, that's how we make our jobs more doable, hopefully back to one that we enjoy because we're properly resourced as well as remunerated.
Josh, did you have another chance to ask a question? Or were you putting your hand up for a question?
No, it's just for a supplement. I disagree with you, Caroline. Actually, I think it's all about pay. That is why we can't attract the staff. That's why so many staff are going off to Dubai, Australia, Canada, because they are not paid enough here. The pay increase that we need is substantially more than any politician, I feel, talks about in the UK. I feel we need more in the region of 15 to 20% pay rise right now to make and this includes care, to make these posts seen as professional again. There was a time in the past where being a nurse or being a medical professional was seen as a superior trade, if you want to put it that way. Not now. That's not the case now. But that's not the guts of my question. The guts of my question is that part of the thing about the pay campaign is that one of the aspects in our negotiations will be the inevitable threat of industrial action. And one of the worst parts of this government's tenure, short as it has been under Rishi Sunak, has been the disgusting attack on trade unions and their anti-strike legislation. Now, I would like to ask each of the candidates, if elected, what would your position be with regard to the government's anti-strike laws? Because I am wholly aware that the incoming Labour government has not committed to reversing what trade union laws the Conservative Party have passed. So I'd like to ask the candidates what's your position individually.
So I was under the impression you had, and that's my working assumption. I've spoken to Angela Rayner 2 Fridays ago. I blame her for us losing 5-1 against Germany, by the way, because she came and wore a Scotland strip to watch the match. We were talking about it actually, so that's what she's committed to it. So I have to take her at her word.
Okay.
Yeah, we would repeal as well.
Chris?
Well, it's not just about repealing, and Angela's a friend of mine, by the way, through this trade union, and I think that both of us, as members of the Unison Group, have articulated trade union positions in Parliament. I'm the only non-Labour MP who's been allowed to join the Unison Group, by the way. But anyway, I think it needs not just the phrase "we will do." We need to scrap the minimum service level bill entirely. And it was interesting that just before the election was called, that the government lost a court case around the fact that they wanted to dismiss people who if they got a letter saying you must turn up and didn't, lost that court case. You need to look at how you ballot. The point was made earlier about snail mail for appointments. Well, a trade union, the trade union laws and industrial action ballots only allow for posting, which in this day and age is completely and utterly ridiculous. You can have, I think, online and indeed workplace balloting, and that's something that we supported and we articulated the position with the the Trade Union Act. And I think you need to do away with some of the nonsensical and the nonsensical percentages that are required. This going back to 1979 devolution referendum, where you've got to have so many people who voted and you've got to have passed such percentages. That has to go as well, because that is clearly designed to stop industrial action happening. And I think that you have to set the space where the trade unions are a key social partner with society and recognised as such, and the abuse from the right-wing media and targeting of trade union activists needs to stop as well.
And I suppose just for clarity, Zubir, I think the pages have been around repealing some aspects of the most recent Tory anti-trade union legislation, but a lot of the most repressive anti-trade union legislation is actually in the 1992 Act. So I'm sure that's something we can talk about. So you may want to ask the question.
Yeah, this is for everybody. Hiya. I'm Susan, I'm the Black Members Officer for Unison. Well, pay is one, and the other one is partnership. Because of the poor partnership of what, as Kathy says, it's affecting our members badly. So that's another reason why the staff are leaving. Because you want to know how you could not retain the staff. The reason is simplified, the way they get treated in the wards. And also, this care system for the patients. I'm giving you the first-hand experience. I work in the wards. For the patients, there's only, for 9 patients, I'll give you an example. For 9 patients, sometimes there's only 2 staff, 1 trainee and 1 auxiliary. So, how do you expect the service, the quality of the service? There's no quality of service there. There's no quality. I'm talking about elderly patients. So the dementia, they come to the ward with a UTI or something, end up having a fracture or something. So that's what it is. And the staff wise, they don't get a break. they work 12-hour shift without a break. So that's breach of health and safety. So, and another thing, I know you're saying about bringing international nurses to the country. So there's many has come, but there's more to come. Is there any policy in place for these nurses? There should be some policy in place for these international nurses, the way they're getting treated in the workplaces. So what have you got in mind for all this? So if you're being selected, how you're going to address, and another thing is the funding. So how are you going to fund if you're not sure how much funding you got?
Okay, Karen, do you want to start?
Yeah, the funding bit's the easiest for me because, well, we're probably not going to have a green government, but certainly we would tax the richest. We would tax the richest 1%, as I was saying earlier on, and that's how we would streamline funding towards. I'm really happy if Labour want to nick our policies, that's totally fine. But from our perspective, I'm really sorry to hear that people are encountering more, I think you're describing abusive behaviour on the wards, which is unacceptable against anyone, and we know more marginalised people, women of colour in particular, are going to experience that a lot more than anyone else, and that's completely unacceptable. There should be a zero tolerance approach to that behaviour on the ward, in any work environment. None of us go to work to get abused. But we should also be open about the fact that it's those frontline workers that are experiencing it, and as you say, there should be a policy in place to safeguard people in that situation, and that's so much harder to do if your working ratio is 2 staff to 8, 10 patients, whatever. How are you supposed to take someone off the floor?
And they're dementia patients as well, so you need to take that into
Absolutely,
consideration.
they've got such high
It can be
care
your mother,
demands.
father in those wards, so you'll need to act.
I think this is part of the problem that I was alluding to earlier on, is people are sometimes leaving because they don't feel like they can do a good job.
No, the
because they're not
nurses
able
are
to
too
care for
fear,
them.
because they do not want to lose their registration because of
Exactly.
this.
Exactly. And
So
then
that's the
you-
reason why they're migrating to other countries.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
the international nurses, they come, they don't know what they're facing, walking into.
Yeah, so you need to be more transparent, safeguarding your workers, and creating a better ratio so that they can do their job well. We need to make sure that we've got more staff who are better paid. I mean, you've heard how I would do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Carolyn. And just to build on Sue's point, and this was one of the ones we had in advance as well, an increased number of our members are raising their right migrant workers on tier 2 visas, and that's in social care and in the health service. Some of the treatment of these workers is not good in the health service as well, and that's something that Sue and others are working hard on at the moment. But the social care, it's absolutely shocking what we're seeing around bogus repayment charges that are getting levied against some people, which is just a form of kind of loan sharking, and the fact that there's such a power differential where some of these care operators know that discipline and dismissal could lead to a family getting deported from the country, and they have to whip hand over people. So, starting with you, Zubir, what are Labour going to do in power with control of the Home Office to secure the position of these workers and actually respect them for the contribution that they make?
So I actually think this is the next big scandal that's going to come out of the National Health Service, actually, is what we're doing with international workers and international medical graduates, because it's simmering, and I think I see it as well, I see the difference actually, how some people treat a nurse with an accent compared to a Scottish one, okay? Let's be honest here.
Yes.
It's happening, and it's happening far too often. And with medical graduates as well, they're in the same situation. They might have the same status on their badge, but they ain't being treated the same, I can tell you that much. And this, I think, goes back to the power dynamic that you mentioned, and it's the power dynamic of the manager who is unaccountable, but we've all got our registrations, yeah? And I'm sure they love to use GMC referral and NMC referral as a threat and as a weapon.
Yes.
And I'm sick of it, actually. And one of the things I'm going to be championing, if I'm honoured enough to be elected, on day one, is having conversations about how we can regulate these people and stop that weaponisation, because this is the toxicity that's building in the National Health Service that I find is particularly repulsive right now. And I think until you get everyone on an even playing field, it doesn't change, because they've got all the power, right? Because the manager comes in and says, right, I don't like you, I'm just going to refer you to the NMC or the GMC and impose charge. The minute that process starts, you know how stressful that is in someone. Even if they haven't done anything wrong. And we've got data to show suicide risk, mental health, it all goes downhill from that minute onwards. And if you're a new person in this country without that support network around you in the first place, that's horrendous. So I think actually it's less of a Home Office issue and more about how we change the power dynamic in the health service.
Specifically around So if there was a Labour UK government in control of the Home Office, the regulations around the treatment of Tier 2 workers, is there anything that you can tell us, group, tonight, that you'll take away about securing the rights of these workers so that they can't be exploited with that power that they want to?
But I don't think it's specific to them. It happens to them more often. But I think the issue is how regulatory frameworks are being weaponised against healthcare workers. And I think the way you sort that out is the ones that have currently got all the power, but none of the accountability. You hold their feet to the fire. You say you're going to be accountable. I think there should be a regulatory body for them, a separate one. There should be no person involved in making decisions in healthcare should be unregulated, whether it's a nurse, a doctor, an HCP, a physio, or a manager. And currently the managers are the only ones that are currently only the unregulated ones. So I think that's where you start, to be honest.
Okay. Not totally happy with that answer, because we'd like to see serious changes at the Home Office and the way these folk are treated. But Chris and then Carol?
Yeah, so I think you've articulated the importance of trade union membership first. And I think that all employers should take a zero tolerance approach to abuse, whether it's racial abuse or any other kind of abuse. That really has to happen. Now, I don't know if the branch has done this, but my suggestion is, if it's not taking place, is that when I was in Glasgow City branch, we noticed that parking attendants were getting battered. You had business owners coming out with bits of wood hitting them. It was quite extraordinary. So we did a survey. So the trade union carried out a staff survey of what was happening out there. And I think that we then took that to the employer to say, this is exactly what's happening. And it was Scott Donald who
We're on it, Chris, don't worry. So in terms of the Home Office policy.
So I think that happens. But if you think that health is dysfunctional, the Home Office will beat it every time. And as someone who has weekly phone calls with the Home Office on all sorts of issues, I can tell you that there was dysfunctional department. The point that's been articulated on the visas, I think, is an important one, and it's something that we continue to push, because we cannot understand the rhetoric that goes on. And I think my very real fear about this election, by the way, regardless of the complete outcome, will be the election of reform MPs, because other political parties will have a choice to make around these individuals. Do you pander to them and their rhetoric, or do you confront them? And I think the discourse around immigration from the Forum and others in the far right, I find stomach churning. And I think it's something that the trade union movement and politicians have to do together, is to confront that rhetoric, because it's based on nonsense, and it's also based on trying to blame other people for the responsibilities of government and big business.
Thanks, Chris. And Carol?
Yeah, the Scottish Greens historically have always believed, well, certainly recently, that the Home Office is inherently racist and that it should be abolished and replaced with a different system. Certainly we, as I've already alluded to earlier, support and really value the role of migrant workers who come here and want to ensure that they are treated equally, and equality is a really core part of green politics. And therefore, if there are specific barriers related to specific visas, we would want to ensure that that is addressed, and being used in that weaponised way to threaten people's security and place here in this country is horrific, and it is inherently racist. And that's absolutely something I'd be committing to challenge.
Thanks, Carol. So we're just over time, and we don't want to keep people for too long. The lives outside of us, but I'll give the last word to Kathy for some closing remarks. Apologies, Kathy, for keeping you waiting.
That's all right, no problem. I've listened to absolutely everything everybody's saying, and actually it's not going to help us at the minute. We're suffering, our members are suffering. As nurses, we're to the wall. Governments, previous governments, have used all the goodwill in the world that the nurses ever had. And as I say, I'm over 45 years a nurse. I never ever remember finishing in time in the morning, always went in a bit earlier at night to let the night staff away. Ward would be busy, we'd stay. So for me, I don't see anything that's changing, and I'm not hearing anybody going to challenge Greater Glasgow and the Clyde board for their actions, but I believe the actions are coming from higher up, because they're the board, but they've got their bosses as well. So for me, that's it. On the pay, I'm absolutely, totally disappointed. I know the SNP have changed their cabinet secretary more than I changed my tops. They're in and out like a blue-ass fly. Now you see them, now you don't. We have sat with them. The latest one, I sit on stack, negotiating on the pay rise. And the bother that we have had to get this cabinet secretary to come to the table, and there's been serious letters written to him and everything else. After all this carry on, we knew when we were coming into election there would be purpose, so there would be a lot of work that would have to stop for a while. But this cabinet secretary has let us down so badly, and we have, I'm happy to send you the copy of the letters that were sent direct to the cabinet secretary about our pay rise. And can I tell you, up to this time, we're no further forward. But what we do is, as we did with the last pay rises, we wait till the government gives us an offer. We look at the offer, and initially, I think we got the one we got last year. I think it's staffed at 2%. I mean, I think we all nearly fell off our seat laughing. No, that's not going to work. So then they come back with 2.5%. Then they come back with 3.5%. Then they come back with 4%. I mean, this time we're getting really, really. And by this time, we're running out of ballots for strike action and everything else. So that's the way, but totally disappointed in this cabinet secretary for not engaging in partnership. Now, we were never used to that of the Scots National Party, because let me tell you, they were ones that used to always come to the table to negotiate pay. Now, just like everything else, I think we would get it, you know, we negotiate this, that, and that, but then we would get there. But this time, to get him to the table, I think if he doesn't understand how the NHS staff are feeling, how bad morale is on the ground, the pressure coming from the management, because as the staff say to me, oh, they hear every day, oh, we need to make a saving, we need to make a saving. And when they say, we're short of a nurse, oh no, can you get one? We're trying to save money. That's what these nurses, everybody, porters, domestics that are hearing every day. Do you realise how demoralising that is for staff? How demoralising every day they have got to listen to this. And we can't even get started on a pay rise for last April for them. I really don't think you understand it. I don't think you understand how demoralised the staff are. And if managers, every time they ask for anything, and it could even be something as simple as maybe a special leave for their child, or their mother who's fallen, or anything else like that, and all that comes into the manager's head is pounds, shillings and pence. I have never known our staff to be so low. See, even all the way through COVID, I tell you, I would have gave them a medal. They were amazing. They were wonderful. They put their own life on, and many died, as at GRI, as in the community, as in Clyde, doing their duty and looking after it. And the way we're being treated, and then we're treated like this, that from April that cabinet secretary can't even come and negotiate and put an offer on the table for us to say yea or nay. It's shocking. I'm sorry, I know I'm on my rant again, but people need to understand what's going on, because it's not going to have a good ending. And whether you like it or not, there's going to be a day, and God help them, it's only for the patients that the staff are so good, but there's going to come a day when you're going to pay a high price for it, because the staff will not take this forever. They're really ground down now.
Kathy,
Thanks.
Kathy, you have my email, you have my phone number, so I'm expecting the letter that you've referred to the Cabinet Secretary to be in my inbox tomorrow morning.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm on holiday.
Kathy, come on.
Give me a break.
Before you go on holiday, Kathy.
So, and I even come in off my holiday tonight.
Oh, good for you.
That's commitment. So, I think.
I'm sure a colleague will send it to me. Instruct them.
I'm afraid just we're over time now, and folk will have other care commitments and other things that they need to get away to, and I know other folk are trying to get in, so apologies if that's frustrating, but I think two last things, rather than asking you for other answers, the deep unhappiness at the working conditions and how folk have been treated in the wake of COVID. I don't think this will be news to Chris as an incumbent MP or to Carolyn or Zubir as NHS doctors who work in some of these services, but that deep unhappiness needs to be answered with real changes in terms of investment and structure, because if you can't nail that, basically if you can't please Kathy by addressing all of these different crises, the health service is going to get into a death spiral, so all of that needs to be addressed, and this isn't just a one-off. Whoever wins will be on at all of the parties after this, and again, we've covered pay at the end of the meeting, and we've covered retention and morale and the working conditions with Marjorie McLuhan, who's put in the chat about the appalling pressure on health visitors and on community health teams. Just to return to that first point, it is insane given everything else that's been talked about with the difficulties discharging people, from the fact that population health in Glasgow is declining in a way that's not been seen since the 19th century, not the 20th century, the 19th century. The idea that community services, early intervention services like health visiting are having jobs cut is absolute madness. So we've had answers from you, we've had questions. We hugely appreciate you taking the time to come in with meet with us and deal with us. But we want you to go away from this meeting tonight to work with us to basically save the NHS, to preserve the NHS, and fight alongside us for the workers that deliver that service, and that goes for social care as well. So, could we have a round of applause for